So, friends, good morning. Today I give this is the fifth lecture on this. Today I talk on preliminary orbit determination. It's a very important area in the area of orbital dynamics. So this let us see this area. This is of historical importance, but still we can contribute in research area in this area. So the idea is we are learning these things to and enlarge our horizon of learning. You sent to Rashmi Bharadwaj also. I have sent her old.
Right, sir. All right. I'm sending him.
So, friends, orbit determination is the estimation of orbits of objects such as moons, planets, and spacecraft. One major application is to allow tracking of newly observed asteroids and verify that they have not been previously discovered. The basic methods were discovered in 17th century and have been continuously refined. You can see a figure there. So sometimes if the distances are known, or if there are different kind of observations we can see. Observations are raw data fed into orbit determination programs. Observation made by a ground-based observer typically consists of time-tagged azimuth, elevation, range, or range rate values. These are some of the typical values which we obtain. Telescopes or radar apparatus are used because naked eye observations are inadequate for precise orbit determination. With more or better observations, the accuracy of orbit determination process also improves. After orbits are determined, mathematical propagation techniques can be used to predict the future positions of orbiting objects. As time goes by, the actual path of an orbiting object tends to diverge from the predicted path. If the object is subject to difficult to predict perturbations, such as atmospheric drag, where the orbit changes quickly, especially when it is near to the Earth, as discussed earlier lecture, the apogee, if it is the elliptic orbit, the apogee doesn't remain same in the next orbit. Every orbit, the apogee will decrease. And perigee also will have a small change, very little change, but it depends upon what kind of orbit is there and which time it is there. Solar activity also plays an important role there. A new orbit determination using new observations serves to recalibrate knowledge of the orbit. So that is how we find out new orbit, and that's how the orbit determination, especially when re-entry time happens, because I was involved in re-entry time. For our friends in ISRO are still doing this. All spacefaring countries, they participate there. So especially the orbits which come in the end, which are below 200 kilometer altitude, and finally the last 2-3 orbits, they come, their altitudes are less than 150 kilometer. Those orbits are quite difficult to. The last orbit is normally whose altitude is between 100 and 120 kilometer, and below 100 is very, very rare, because by that time the satellite starts decaying into the Earth, and it starts burning also around 78 kilometer altitude. Satellite tracking is another major application. The United States Space Surveillance Network detects, tracks, catalogs, and identifies artificial objects orbiting Earth, active, inactive satellites, spent rocket bodies, or fragmentation debris. The observations are used in new orbit determination calculations that maintain the overall accuracy of the satellite catalog. Collision avoidance calculation may use this idea to calculate the probability that one orbiting object will collide with another. This is the very important activity for all spacefaring countries whose whose satellites are in space. A satellite's operator may decide to adjust the orbit if the risk of collision in the present orbit is unacceptable. So many times we also in ISRO also have done this, and our people, our friends do it now also. Whenever it comes very nearby, probability is high, very high, then they do some shift in the path. You see this one, the number of space objects. This I put it morning, every morning when I do this lecture, so I spend few hours on this. Today I got up around 4 o'clock and then I was working on this. So you can see 1957, the first satellite went in October 1957, and then gradually the bodies started going into orbit. And now you see how the total objects, you can see how they are growing. And when I saw this line, then I remembered that in 2007, China did an anti-satellite missile test. And you see the timings. We, India, in ISRO did SRE-1, that is re-entry. I have given a photo on the left. You can see left down. The photo there. This was the only experiment we have done so far for the re-entry, and it was highly successful. And 10th January we did it, and 11th January Chinese anti-satellite missile test. So they destroyed their satellite at the altitude of 865 kilometers, whose mass was around 750 kilograms. And you can see how many debris, the pink one you can see, because these are all fragments. So how many fragments were generated when they have hit from the ground? More than 3,000 objects were generated, and it is not easy to find all the orbits of all those 3,000 objects immediately. So our vehicle, our SRE was at 637 kilometers, but those fragments, they will go in all directions. Even inclination they will change, some different directions. So I think we were lucky that it was saved. It got saved. I was working we were working for this debris team, whether to safeguard from the because we were also worried that this Chinese fragments. But by that time, US people have only identified not so many, but still some of them were coming near to this. And once we thought that it is very near, we told our project director of the SRE, Mr. Madan Lal was there, and we told, sir, this is the situation. Then he discussed with his team and other. Then he says, okay, we have to take a calculated risk, because doing all corrections is also another problem. But you see, friends, with God's grace, our thing came. But you can see historically, this is the only time this many objects have increased in the history. China was criticized quite a lot by various space agencies all through world. But anyway, that is all goes continues. But it has increased the debris, and in that altitude, some of them will not come easily. If some of the debris, those are there trapped somewhere around 800, because they have done at 865. So some of them even will go in higher altitude than that. Or even if they supposing some orbit is around 500 by 900 or 500 by 2000, that will not easily come. So many of them have come, and still some of their debris are still in orbit. So that is how this line, I thought I should tell, and I remembered also the time when this happened. Space surveillance accomplishes the following: predict when and where the decaying space object will re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. That is how we used to work on this. They will identify a very big object, and then all orbits will be determined by them. It is like an exam, online examination for all spacefaring countries, people who are working on this area. So they will have to immediately do it, and marks will be given who does and how much accuracy. Like that, there are marks for that. And in the end, it will be declared which country how much who did best, like that. There will be results also will be presented in the next their meeting, or even in the international forum it will be discussed. Prevent a returning space object which to radar looks like a missile from triggering a false alarm in missile attack warning sensors of the US. So this is dangerous and other countries. So it prevents that all that kind of things. Chart the present position of space debris and plot their anticipated orbital paths. All the orbital, because that is predictable. You can predict the path of the satellites. Detect new artificial objects in space. Once we lost our GSLV, GSLV. I was in Sriharikota. We were for the GSLV launch, and it so happened that the satellite went into orbit, but there was some differences in the end conditions. So they could not find out, and our radars also could not locate. Night anyway, we were sleeping. We were called that somebody said chairman is calling you. And I went, and my other friend both of us working, we went there. Then they said, can you find out where is our satellite? We knew that, and by the time NASA, US people would have already located an object, that it is in orbit. And then we went there, found out from the objects, and then said, this is our object. Then with that thing, the prediction by those our people made it, and they located within 2-3 hours. Otherwise, our satellite was lost. So for that, anyway, I got also one award also for that, as a team award for GSLV thing. So you see, these are all very important ones. So orbit determination is a very important thing, and without that we just cannot, because there are small bodies from Earth. You have to all the time find out. Correctly map objects traveling in the Earth orbit. Produce a running catalog of artificial space objects. Determine ownership of a re-entering space object. And inform NASA whether or not objects may interfere with the international space, because international space station is there, and safeguarding this international, where human beings are working there inside, safeguarding this international space station is very important. So for this they do all those objects which come nearby. They do that. They do the orbit determination very accurately, and keep a very good track that nothing should. If something a bigger one is about to come, then they will change the path of the space station. See, some of the stations just put it to show you that worldwide they have put US space surveillance network is there. Worldwide network of 29 optical and radar, mechanical, phased array sensors. They are all through the world. So they are using this. This is again same. I've taken whatever good figures I got from the internet. I thought let me tell where are those locations. And one more I have given. So these are, you can see, dedicated optical site, dedicated radar site, collated radar site, contributing radar site, planned future site. So these are all these things. Now history. Orbit determination has a long history, beginning with the discovery of planets and subsequent attempts to predict their motion. Johannes Kepler used Tycho Brahe's careful observations of Mars to deduce that we learned to deduce the elliptic shape of its orbit and its orientation in space, deriving the 3 great laws of planetary motion in the process. He used Tycho Brahe's observations, and then he used his mathematical mind, and then he used and did these 3 laws. The mathematical methods of orbit determination originated with the publication in 1687 of Newton's Principia, which gave a method for finding the orbit of a body following a parabolic path from 3 observations. He used 3 observations, and then he could find out the parabolic path. Anything when we are throwing, that parabola, that kind of thing, from there he found out. This was used by Edmund Halley to establish the orbits of various comets, including that which bears Halley's name, 76 years. It came in, I think, 1975 or 76 it came. Now again, you add 76 years. So you will be seeing Many of you will be seeing that, and at that time there will be lot of excitement throughout the world, because it is visible by naked eyes also. Newton's method of successive approximation was formalized into an analytic method by Euler in 1744, whose work was in turn generalized to elliptic and hyperbolic orbits by Lambert. This also this is a very wonderful, because in interplanetary, see, he did it in 1761 to 1777. Now all interplanetary travels, Lambert's theorem is utilized. Whatever work he did, that is utilized. Here, when you know two positions, time between them, then you have only a unique orbit passing through that. So that proof also we will see. Zabbe has got, and he has written one small book, Adventures in Celestial Mechanics, and there he provided a good proof. So that I have picked up. So that also in one of the lectures we will learn. Another milestone in orbit determination was Carl Friedrich Gauss' assistance in the recovery of Draft Planet series in 1801. This was a very important work which Gauss did. Gauss' method was able to use just 3 observations in the form of celestial coordinates to find the 6 orbital elements. We have learned the 6 orbital elements: A, I, capital Omega, small omega, and true anomaly, that completely describe an orbit. The theory of orbit determination has subsequently been developed to the point where today it is applied to GPS receivers, as well as the tracking and cataloging of new observed minor planets. Now, I thought this is opportunity for us to remember some of our great mathematicians, because most of us are mathematics background people. So Leonhard Euler, because he has contributed to our orbit determination as well, but I morning saw into Google and just find out a few lines for him. Leonhard Euler, 15 April 1707 to 18 September 1783. By that time, I think the lifespan was okay, but previous to that, some of the scientists used to die within the age of 50 to 60 years. But there, I think this age is okay. This is somewhat better. Was a Swiss mathematician, physicist, astronomer, geographer, logician, and engineer, who made important and influential discoveries in many branches of mathematics, such as infinitesimal calculus and graph theory, while also making pioneering contribution to several branches such as topology and analytical number theory. He also introduced much of the modern mathematical terminology and notation, particularly for mathematical analysis, such as the notion of a mathematical function. He is also known for his work in mechanics, fluid mechanics, optics, astronomy, and music theory. Euler was one of the most eminent mathematicians of the 18th century and is held to be one of the greatest in history. Euler's power of memory and concentration was legendary. He had a wonderful memory. Yeah, some examples are there. I have just picked up only this line, that he has wonderful memory. Now let us remember Gauss also. Johannes Carl Friedrich Gauss. He also had a reasonably good life. Was a German mathematician and physicist who made significant contributions to many fields of mathematics and science. Gauss had an exceptional influence in many fields of mathematics and science, and it's ranked among history's most influential mathematicians. Gauss was a child prodigy. When Gauss was barely 3 years old, he corrected a math error his father made. You imagine 3 years, I don't know how could he understood what his father was doing maths. And that when he was 7, he confidently solved an arithmetic series problem, commonly said to be 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus so and so up to 100, faster than anyone else in his class of 100 students. You see, those days 100 students were there in one class. He completed his magnum opus Disqualines Arithmetic in 1798 at the age of 21, just 21, though it was not published until 1801. This work was fundamental in consolidating number theory as a discipline and has shaped the field to the present day. So these two great people we remembered. On 1st January 1801, Italian astronomer Piazzi discovered the draft planet Ceres. Piazzi could only track Ceres for more than a month, so he had some observations with him. Then it disappeared temporarily behind the glare of the sun. Several months later, when Ceres should have reappeared, Piazzi could not locate it. The mathematical tool of the time were not able to extrapolate a position from such a scant amount of data. He did not have enough data, and the tools were also not so great. Gauss heard about the problem and tackled it. He heard that such a such problem is there, so he started tackling it. After 3 months of intense work, he worked for 3 months very hard. He predicted a position for Ceres in December 1801, just about a year after its first sighting. And this turned out to be accurate within a half degree. When it was rediscovered by friend Xaver, because he gave the information about what he has got, Xaver and von Zach on 31st December at Gotha, and 1 day later by Heinrich Olbers in Bremen. This confirmation eventually led to the classification of Ceres as minor planet, designation 1 Ceres, the first asteroid, now draft planet, ever discovered. So you see, that was a great contribution by Gauss. Gauss method, we do not know later on whether it would have it would have taken some more time, or whether it would have been lost. We do not know, or it would have taken some more time to find out. Gauss method involved determining a conic section in space given one focus, the sun, and the conic's intersection with 3 given lines, line of sight from the Earth, which is itself moving on an ellipse to the planet, and given the time it takes the planet to traverse, the arc determined by these lines, from which the lengths of the arcs can be calculated by Kepler's second law. The equal time in equal area, that law is used. This problem leads to an equation of the 8th degree, of which one solution, the Earth orbit, is known. The solution sought is then separated from the remaining 6 based on physical conditions. In this work, Gauss used comprehensive approximation methods, which he created for that purpose. So that was a great contribution by Gauss. So we remember him in the history, and we teach also this. This is there in the book. Whatever book we are having, this is nicely discovered, but it's a little complicated to teach. Data. In order to determine the unknown orbit of a body, some observations of its motion with time are required. In early modern astronomy, the only available observation data for celestial objects were the right ascension and declination. Right ascension and declination obtained by observing the body as it moves in its observation arc relative to the fixed stars using an optical telescope. This corresponds to knowing the object's relative direction in space, measured from the observer, but without knowledge of its distance of the object. The resultant measurement contains only direction information, like a unit vector. With a radar, the relative distance measurements and relative velocity measurements are possible using radio telescope. Methods. Orbit determination must take into account that the apparent celestial motion of a body is influenced by the observer's own motion. A key observation is that all objects move in orbits that are conic sections, which the attracting body in the prime focus, and that the orbit lies in a fixed plane. That is important. The orbit lies in a fixed plane. See, the vectors drawn from the attracting body to the body at different points in time will all lie in the orbital plane. If the position and velocity related to the observer are available, these observational data can be adjusted by the known position and velocity of the observer relative to the attracting body at the times of observation. This yields the position and velocity with respect to the attracting body. If two such observations are available along with the time difference between them, the orbit can be determined using Lambert's method. This is also a very complicated method, but as I told, Zabé has given a very nice. He must have picked up nicely, and that also we will study in one of the lectures, Lambert's method. And Batin has also in his book he has given. So these two we will, because this is very important problem in the interplanetary travel when we go from Earth to say Mars or to Venus or to Moon also. So Lambert, we have to use this orbit method to reach to those destinations. Now the history is over. Now we'll see. This is simple. Here we just prove that the angular momentum is constant. You can see we have studied that H is equal to R cross R dot, R cross V. Now you take the derivative of this, dH by dt. So when you take the derivative, R dot cross R dot plus R cross R double dot. Now R cross dot R cross R dot cross R dot is equal to 0, because anyway both are the same vector, so cross product is 0. So the angle between them is 0, and so sine of 0 is 0. So R double dot is the two-body problem, minus mu by R cube and R vector. So now you replace there R cross R double dot, you replace R cross minus mu R cube by R, and minus mu by R cube is a scalar, take outside, you remain inside R cross R. Again, they are again same vector, cross product is 0, so 0. So we have proved that dH by dt is 0, or so H is constant. So angular momentum, this is the proof for that angular momentum is constant in two-body problem, because this result is used everywhere when we study two-body problem. So therefore we have the conservation of angular momentum. This we studied last time, but this will be used in the next for orbit determination also. So quickly I will not go much detailed. We have the equation, and you can see the equation 2. When you multiply by the angular momentum H, so you multiply that, keep it. Now you can finally simplify the whole thing. We discussed last time. We can simplify the whole thing, and we get the equation 4. R cross. Finally, we will get this equation, and in the end, we will get the equation of an ellipse. And in between, we have this equation also, which we use. Equation number 5 is important. R by R plus E. E vector is the eccentricity vector. R dot. So V cross H by mu. And that is where this is what we use when we find out the eccentricity. Because when we supply velocity and this has been utilized when we were doing that conversion from the position and velocity elements. And we were calculating by this formula, and this comes in the derivation. So that now, since this was done last time, but it is needed, so I thought I'll just keep it here in this lecture, so that it is to keep it as a continuity. And the 8th equation also useful, because they are all coming from other one only. R plus R dot E is equal to H square by mu. So R dot E, H square by we will be using in the next one. So we have R dot E is R dot. You see the figure. This figure we use at that time. These are all from Curtis book. Curtis is a very wonderful book, and I think Dr. Rajiv Agarwal has done wonderful job to download the 4th latest edition. It's a huge book. It contains. I'm trying to search what are the new things it has given, but it's a very good book, which can give lot of good information about many things. Even perturbation theory also. See, when research, when we do, these are many areas are still for mathematicians, they are open. Many areas where mathematics people can do wonderful job in the area of celestial dynamics, because there are not many people who do theoretical work. It is with the time when computers are coming, people are using more computers, and the theoretical work is reducing. It's reducing quite a lot. So, since most of you are very good in mathematics, you can pick up some good problems. And one advantage of if you involve mathematics, paper get published very fast. The referees will feel, yeah, he has done something better because he has used mathematics. Sometimes numerical results, sometimes it becomes difficult to pass through also. So you can see here theta. Theta is the angle between the eccentricity vector. Eccentricity vector passes through the perigee, and r is the radial any point whose distance is r from the focus. So this is the r dot t. Is r mod e mod into angle between the two vectors. And once you put it there, we get r is equal to h square by mu. This is a fundamental equation, polar coordinate for the same equation what we nonlinear equation we started. So this is the equation, orbit equation. Now we say Gibbs method for orbit. I have chosen only this because this is the easiest. The all other methods I found they are difficult, and but this is very wonderful. He used only vectors. Gibbs method for orbit determination from 3 position vectors. Whatever he did, our friend, when he was doing in this one, when he did from three observations, so we are using his method was very complicated because he was a very brilliant person, so somehow he got the solution. But he has used Gibbs has used only vectors and made everything look very simple. So Josiah Willard Gibbs, 1839 to 1903. Later he came in that time, and you see he lived less, 3940. Okay, around his life little less only, 46. So Gibbs was an American mathematician best known for the Gibbs effect seen when Fourier analyzing a discontinuous function. See, normally the other discontinuous function, normally we are using that other transformation. What is it called? I was okay. I may not. So he used Fourier analyzing a discontinuous function. That was his great contribution. So Gibbs' work on vector analysis was of major importance in pure mathematics. He applied his vector methods to give a method of finding the orbit of a comet from 3 observations. Same 3 observations. So the method was applied to find the orbit of Swift's comet in 1880 and involved less computation than Gauss. So Gauss was a very he has used a lot of other things, and it became complicated method. But he wanted a solution that time, so he has given a solution there that time. But he rationalized the whole thing. Gibbs has rationalized the whole thing, and with the help of vectors. And you can see this. That's why I picked up this. We have 3 position vectors available to us. Now we have to find the orbit. If we know one position vector and velocity vector, we can find out the orbit. Or if we know 2 position vector and the time between them, we can find out. But if we have got 3 position vectors, we have to see now how do we find out the orbit, because we do not know the time also. Time has to be very accurately known, then only it has got some meaning. So Gibbs method we study here. Suppose that the space objects at time t1, t2, t3, we have r1, r2, r3. Now the problem is to determine velocity v1, v2, v3 at time t1, t2, t3. We know the conservation of angular momentum. Just now we saw that h is equal to 0, h is equal to constant. Requires the position vector of an orbiting body must lie in the same plane. In other words, a unit vector normal to the plane r2, r3 must be perpendicular to the unit vector in the direction r1. That is correct, because r1, r2, r3 are in the same plane. So a unit vector you take in the direction of r1, 1 minute. So you take a unit vector there, R1 by R1, and C2, 3. That is unit vector R2 cross R3. So this is again perpendicular to R2 and R3, and mod of R2 R3 vector cross. So then the dot product of these two vectors must vanish. Dot product of these two must vanish. So that is a condition which, when your orbits are properly calculated, this is a condition which he uses for checking. Now, when they are all lying in one plane, then you can write one vector in terms of the other, linear combination of the two scalars in terms of you can write R2 is equal to C1 R1 plus C3 R3, and this is E vector same what we have already got. Okay. So this vector, to find the velocity, now we have to find a velocity vector. Our main purpose is how to get velocity vector. One velocity we get either at corresponding to R1 or R2 or R3, that our job is done. To find the velocity v corresponding to any of these three position R, now you from A, you can say the V cross H. The same value we are rewriting this equation, eccentricity vector, in this form. V cross H is there in that whatever is that blue type is there. V cross H is equal to mu R by R plus E vector, or R plus R, E is equal to, rewrite this thing. So you have R plus R divided by R plus E vector is equal to R dot cross H by mu. So this is E is nothing but C by mu that we have seen earlier. Now this R you multiply now, cross multiply with H, previous equation, H cross V cross H. So all the equation you have multiply. Now you find out H cross V cross H left hand side. You see left hand side becomes only, that is V vector into H dot H minus H vector into H dot, this is the normal formula, our A cross B cross, that is BAC minus ABC, that is the formula which we learned in our vectors. So same formula use. Now H dot H is H square and V dot H will be 0 because V lying in the orbital plane and H is perpendicular to that. So that is 0. And so we get, you see, you put the values there. So we get now that the H cross V cross H is equal to only H square and V vector. The second will not come, which means that equation 5.2 may be written as V is equal to mu by H square, because left hand side you write that H square by V, H square he has put it down. So V is left here. Here this is H square V. So here V and H square is kept down. So and you are left with H cross R by R and H cross E. So this equation has come. So trying now, this equation is now unit vector. Now this equation is of now will be of fundamental use for us. The unit vector P lies in the direction of the eccentricity vector E, and W is a unit vector normal to the orbital plane. Normal to the orbital plane in the direction of angular momentum H. So you write E vector as in terms of the unit vector P, E mod into P vector and H mod into W vector. So P and W, you have introduced. Now you substitute this in this previous one. In this one, you substitute these values in this 5.3. So you will get in this form 5.5 you get, and you can see H is common there. So H and down H square, so one H get cancelled. So mu by H, W cross R by R plus E, W cross P. Now you know P, Q, W. We take this as a right-handed. In general, we use right-handed triad of unit vectors. So we have P cross Q is equal to W, Q cross W is equal to P, and W cross P is equal to Q. Now because 5.5 W cross P is coming, in the last term on the right. So you replace that by q vector. So we get v is equal to mu by h, w cross r by r. It's a little lengthy, but if we read 2-3 times and understand the physics, how logic is coming, then it is not difficult. And q vector. And so from here, the same, we are writing E vector in this form. And now you multiply, scalar multiply by R, that equation. So R dot R by R plus R dot E is equal to R dot cross H by mu. Now A dot B cross C, the scalar product we are using, where you can replace the dot and the cross. So that we are using that. So you will get R dot cross H. This will come equal to R cross R dot H, and R cross R dot is nothing but H. R dot V is angular momentum, H dot H, and that will become H square. So substituting R dot R is equal to R square. There so R dot R is R square. So one R will get cancelled in that equation, top equation, and R dot E, and then the left hand side, the right hand side will become H square by mu, because R dot cross H was equal to H square, that we have proved. So this is the equation which is very, very, very useful to us later. R plus R dot E is equal to H square by simple manipulation of through the vectors. This has come. This up to this not much problem. Up to end also not much problem. Only it will look little this thing. Now to bring the fact that they describe an orbit, let us take the dot product of equation 5.1. 5.1. You can see the 5.1. So that actually I was trying to push them nearby only. This is the equation 5.1. I should have written now 5.1 here also. Some place I was writing. So with the eccentricity vector, to obtain the scalar equation, this. Now you have written that. So you have multiplied by E. So you have now we have the following relations with R. We have the previous equation. So we use that equation. We use this equation, R dot E. So R1 dot E, like that we will use here. So we have used R has been replaced by R1, R2, R3. So R1 dot E, H square by V by R1. You see here, this R will go to the B. You see B, R will go to the right hand side. So R1 dot E equal to H square by mu minus R1. R dot E is equal to H square mu minus R2, and R3 dot E is equal to H square mu minus R3. So it will become these three equations we get. Now substituting these equation in 5.8, because there because all these are coming there. You have R2 dot E, R1 dot E, and R3 dot E. So when you substitute, you get 5.10. Okay, H square by mu minus R2, and so up to this. Because C1, C3 we have to somehow we have chosen at will, so we have to eliminate from this solution. So to eliminate the unknown coefficient C1, C2 from this expression, let us take the cross product of 5.1. This is the 5.1. I have written here 5.1. You take cross product with R1 and then with R3. The result two equations have R3 cross R1. You see down, I have written here 5.1. So that is, you take first with R1. So R2 cross R1 will be equal to R1 cross R1 will be 0. And you get the other one, R3, C3 into R3 cross R1. And when you do with the R3, the second term will not come. R2 cross R3 is equal to minus. He has replaced R1 minus R1 cross R3. He has written R3 cross R1 minus sign. That's why A cross B is equal to minus B cross A. That formula is used. Minus C1 R3 cross R1. So now multiplying equation. So I am taking you to to the vectors what we have learnt in our colleges, or what some of us might be teaching also. Now multiply equation 5.10. 5.10. This equation we multiply this by through the vector R3 cross R1. Now you multiply that equation by R3 cross R1. So everywhere you multiply this, all the terms you write in that file. And now equation, now using equation 511, 5.11 you use. 5.11 is this. These values you use there. Use them. It will come into, because this C3 C1 that it will get. So your C1 C3 will not come, because they are. You can see here. C3 R3 cross R1 is R2 cross R1, and minus C1 R3 cross R1 is R2 cross R3. So he is eliminating those things. So he got it in this equation. C1 C3 have been eliminated now. Rearranging, we get this equation, the down equation, and that can be written equal to this. So here that C1 C3 is not there. 5.12, there is no C1 C3. So you have just by simple manipulation with vectors, you have been able to do it. And this is an equation involving given position vectors and the unknown angular momentum h. Still angular momentum h is not known. Introduce the following notation for the vectors for each. This is to simplify, because to write the things simple. So n notation is for R1 into R2 cross R3 plus R2, very symmetrical also. R2 R3 cross R1 plus R3 R1 cross R2. And D is equal to R1 cross R2 plus R2 cross R3 plus R3 cross R. When he writes these in 5.10, this one, you see the whole thing looks that n is equal to, n vector is equal to h square by mu and d vector, from which when you take the magnitudes, n is equal to h square by mu d. Now n is the mod of this and d is the. It follows from equation 5.15 that the angular momentum h is determined, because other values are all function of R1, R2, R3. So you know all those, you can calculate n and you can calculate d. So you have calculated the angular, mu is a constant, gravitational constant. Value is 398600 for Earth. 398600 kilometer cube by second square. So that is the value for the mu. So you have calculated h. And now, since R1, R2, R3 are coplanar, all the cross product R1 cross R2, R2 cross R3 and R3 cross R1 lie in the same direction, namely normal to the orbital plane, because R1, R2, R3 are in the orbital plane. So their cross products will be normal to the orbital plane. The R1, if any two vector you take and then cross product. Therefore, it is clear from equation 5.14 that D must be normal to the orbital plane, because D, you can see here, the logic is interesting, because D is containing only this sum of these. So all these vectors, when they are normal, so the sum is also normal. So D must be normal to the orbital plane. In this context of the perifocal frame, we use W to denote the orbit unit normal, because we have taken two vectors, but one more was W is not W is a normal to this thing. So that here is being defined D by D vector by the mod of D. So far we have found H and W in terms of R1, R2, R3, because D is found and then D vector is found. So you have found W vector also. We need likewise to find now expression for Q from equation 5.17. 5.17, let us see what was 5.17. 5.17. This is same. I told you, this equation is of fundamental importance. This is what we have got this here. So this one we will use, which we got V is equal to mu by H, W cross R by R. Now Q is to be located from here. So now we know Q is equal to W cross P. because we know PQW, PWQ, that PQW, they are forming in the right-handed triad. So W cross P, and now W cross P, put their values. W is known D by D, D mod by D, and P is in terms of E vector. So this vector is there, and that helps you, because once you substitute values, you got the Q vector also. Q also, once in terms of R1, R2, R3, you got this. So we can now apply this formula. Q vector, we got this. Okay, this formula, and now we use this formula now across the BACCAB formula, and now using the vector, these identities R2 cross R3 cross E, and all this you calculate, and then you employing equation 5.9, then we will get, when you multiply this, you will get this in this right hand side. You see this fellow, you will get this, and then summing all these, we will get Q is equal to 1 by DE, and S is again function of R1, R2, R3. So we have located now Q also. Q is substitute. So we only that was left. So you substitute now in V, in that equation, the previous equation what we saw, mu by H, W cross R, we have substituted for W D by D, and R we have substituted. R is anyway known to us, and R will give you R1, R2, R3, whether you want the value. Now V is general in terms of R. So whether you want V1, then you write R1, you write V2, you write R2, you want V3, you write R3, and S vector is there, because they are all function of R1, R2, R3. So this is the formula. So now we are simplifying all this. V becomes just you put substitute, simplify them. So you write this. This is the V you have located. So this is how you see. You can see quickly once more, so that now just to show you, because you have to read it one or two times carefully, then you will understand, because the only algebra is there. This is the important point, and after doing this thing, we come with this equation, and we come finally with this equation, and this equation later on manipulate again. We go back to the earlier equation, and then this equation we are using again and again, and then doing with that whatever we have observed R2 in terms of linear combination of R1, R2, that equation we are using, doing this thing, and finally we are calculating the angular momentum, and then from there only Q is left. Then Q also we calculate in terms of the vector with all these manipulations, and then we are able to get the velocity. So this is a very general formula, because velocity in terms of you got R and R. S anyway is known, a function of R1, R2, R3. So whether you want V1, you can get V1. You want V2, you can get V2. You want V3, you can get V3. He has given one worked example also. Calculate if R1, R2, R3 are given, how to calculate. These are the vectors are given in this form: I, J, K, R1, R2, R3. Now calculate R1, R2, R3. Calculate those vectors. C12 is nothing but R1 cross R2 is C12, R2 cross R3 is C23, and R3 cross R1 is C31. So with the help of, you calculate those vectors and and then you can find the unit vector, and then you see UR1 dot this. The value has come minus 6.1181 into 10 to the minus 6. So it should be ideally 0. So if you work with more number of digits, you will be able to get this number, because these are the all digits may not be taken in this. So this is a check whether things are going correctly or not. Because if it doesn't work, this is not valid, then this problem is also that those R1, R2, R3 are not lying in the same plane. and because they are all functions of C1, C2 and R1, R2, so they can be calculated. Similarly, D is calculated, and then S is also function of the R1, R2. So only calculations are little bit looking longer, but it is not very complicated. Then V2, you have the V2 now. You give R2 value, you will get V2. So V2 he has located, and once you know V2 and R2, we know how to calculate. The orbit came like this: A is equal to 8,000 kilometer, E is equal to 0.1, I is equal to 60 degrees, capital omega right ascension is equal to 40, small omega 30, and theta is equal to 50. All are there. It's a wonderful example where they all the he has taken, he has done a good job in his book. So this book he has given, and then from his book only I have chosen from different places. I have chosen some questions also. So those who are interested, to further strengthen their strength, some questions are also there. The discussion is there. Their velocity V2 he has given also. Other one, V2 is given. Question 2 also V2 is there. Vector form is there. Other form, vector form is not there. Only the magnitude is there. And then here also the vector form is there. This I just scanned the book and found out whether I can get some examples. So I got some example. So with this, I think my lecture is through here. 1 hour.